There are all sorts of different people in the world. There are people who love to dance, people who love to eat, and even people who love to watch reruns of I Love Lucy late at night. The world is big enough for all of these people, but after a while we start to develop patterns in our heads. We see people that are happy and people that are sad, people that are angry and people that are calm, people that deserve to be punished and people that deserve to be free. Today we are going to look and see how different types of people, specifically liberals and conservatives, impacted history in the 19th century. Today we're going to focus on two types of people, liberals and conservatives. For a more in-depth look at liberals and conservatives, watch the video on Europe in the 1800s, which goes into more depth on the differences between the two. For today, all you need to know is that liberals and conservatives both sit on a teeter-totter similar to the one below. You can either be a liberal, a conservative, or if you were somewhere in the middle, you would be considered a moderate, similar to the word middle. Most people in the world are not extreme liberals or conservatives, but rather they are moderates or perhaps a little bit conservative or a little bit liberal. When there are the same number of liberals and the same number of conservatives, we could say that power is balanced. We know this is true because just as in algebra, if there are three numbers on one side and three numbers on the other, then the numbers are equal and the teeter-totter is balanced. We call this equalness the balance of power. But let's say, for whatever reason, that some of the moderates decide to become liberals. Now there is no longer balance of power. The balance of power now leans toward the liberals. For the terms of this history lesson, when the balance of power shifts towards the liberals, revolutions tend to happen more quickly. This happened almost every day in France. Seriously, France had a revolution just about as often as Lindsay Lohan has to go back to rehab, or the amount of bad movies that Nicolas Cage has done after his so-called golden age. However, let's say that some of these same groups of moderates instead decide to become conservatives. Now the balance of power is shifted towards the conservatives. When the balance of power shifts towards the conservatives, revolutions tend to happen more slowly. During the French Revolution, the liberals were able to keep their power because they used this bad boy known as the guillotine, and anyone who disagreed with them, well, that's what happened. Napoleon was the only one able to stop the liberals, and he shifted France back towards its more conservative roots. Like we have already said, most people are not on the extreme ends of being either liberal or conservative. If you are on the extreme ends of being either liberal or conservative, you are known as a radical. The only time that radical ideas become truly popular is if a king or queen starts to really upset the people and they get desperate. This happened once in French history when they were being ruled by a man known as Charles X. He basically threatened to undo everything that the French Revolution had begun. He wanted to give nobles back their tax-free status and wanted to return the world to a world with estates. Many of the people began moving more towards the radical ends of the Liberal Party until the balance of power shifted and another revolution began. People began gathering in the streets and creating barricades. To imagine this, imagine that your school wants to rise up against the teachers. You might throw desks and chairs in the hallways to block passageways, and this is exactly what the students in France did. They created barricades in the streets, and they used rocks and other materials to start fighting the French army. Charles X was so scared that he abdicated the throne and left France altogether. The French decided to put someone more moderate on the throne, known as Louis Philippe. He brought the people back more towards the center and toward the balance of power. Louis Philippe was famous for many reasons, but mostly he dressed like the middle class, he mingled with the common people, he filled his government with liberals, and under him the upper bourgeoisie prospered. He was known as the citizen king because he wasn't afraid to hang out with the middle class and be seen acting like a middle class person. But like many other moderates of his time in the 1800s, he believed only those with land should vote and those without land should not be able to vote. It would not be till later that universal manhood suffrage would be achieved. Other countries also tried to start having revolutions, including Belgium. Britain and Germany decided that in order to protect themselves from France, they would make Belgium and Holland one country in order to protect them from France. A buffer is like, let's say you have an enemy that you're scared of, you put your friend in between yourself and your enemy to help protect you from your enemy. This is a buffer. It's like a protection zone. And that is why the British and the Germans made Holland and Belgium one country in order to protect themselves from the French. The problem was Belgium was Catholic while Holland was Protestant, and Belgium was based on manufacturing while Holland was based on trade, so they really didn't get along. However, the liberals in Belgium were able to convince the people of Holland to allow them to have their freedom, and they gained independence from Holland. The story did not go so well for Poland, however. Poland had been broken up into three parts by the Russians and the Czechs and many other people, and they wanted to regain their country and become one country again. However, the Russians wanted nothing to do with that, and they wanted the Polish to stay the way they were, so they sent a whole bunch of people to protect the conservatives and able to keep Poland the way it was, and the balance of power shifted towards the conservative, and Poland never actually received their freedom. And that is a brief introduction to some of the revolutions that happened in the 1800s in Europe.